April 11th. Welcome to everyone here. First up is the public forum. Public forum is an opportunity for individuals to speak to the City Council on any city-related issues except for those items which have already been heard by a hearings official or are on tonight's agenda as a public hearing. Each person will have 3 minutes to speak. When you come to the podium, please give your name, city of residence, and for Eugene residents, your ward if known. The timer and lights indicate the time you have to speak. The red light indicates the end of 3 minutes. And we have 34 people signed up. So, off we go. Angela Norman is up first, followed by Shona Lee Crocker Forrest.
Hi, my name is Angela Norman. I'm the market director at the Lane County Farmers Market.
Could you speak into the mic, please?
Sure.
Or bring it closer to you. I think you're too far away.
Great.
Right up.
Right, a little
A
closer.
little closer, all right.
There you go.
First time caller. Okay, so our farmers market is an essential part of our local agriculture system and economy. We provide a retail home for over 80 local farmers and food artisans. And currently we operate on an oddly configured sidewalk with little space for vendors and less space for customers. At opening day this year on April 2nd, we had roughly 8,000 visitors at market, and the sidewalks were extremely crowded and tough to navigate. At present, the market occupies about 25,000 square feet of outside sidewalk space. This is not adequate for our current market and provides no space for expansion to add more farms, locally produced food products, food carts, and other service for our customers. We are currently talking to the county and the city of Eugene about ways to expand the market's home. The most promising alternative is the redevelopment of the Butterfly Block, named for the parking garage on that block. This plan would relocate the parking and the home of the future new Lane County Courthouse to another site. The county and the city are discussing the joint development of the city's City Hall block for these purposes. Preliminary planning shows that there is adequate space and flexibility on the city site to accommodate both the city's and the county's needs. Under this plan, the current Butterfly parking lot would be redeveloped as an expanded park and outdoor market. The farmers market would have over twice the current space for market operations, 50,000 square feet or more. We ask that the city continue to work closely with the county to promote the Butterfly Lot as an expanded permanent farmers market location and work towards a memorandum of agreement that would allow interim phases to take place. Continuing urban renewal for additional funds for the farmers market project would continue to build the momentum for the project and could significantly decrease the funding barrier. The plan for the Butterfly Lot would keep the farmers market on the site where it originally took root 100 years ago. The expansion would be a big support to our network of local farmers, our economy, and the local food supply. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Shona Lee Crocker Forrest, followed by Alicia Reed.
Hello, I'm Shona Lee Crocker Forrest in Eugene. And I'm here today to talk about the fences that were built in Washington Jefferson Park. And I want to say that I'm very disappointed in the money that was wasted on the fences when it's not a solution to the issues that homelessness cause and that are being faced by our unhoused community members. I want to say that I understand that you voted on Housing First Options in March and in support of that, and I want to thank you for that support. For those of us who may not know, Housing First is an approach that centers on providing homeless people with housing quickly and then providing services as needed after housing is provided. I'd also like to mention that I understand that there's a railroad quiet zone that there's a survey online for it, and the amount of money that is being proposed to be spent on that is $6.8 million to $7.4 million, And I want to say that it seems as though the city's priorities are not straight. It seems like quite a privilege to have the concern of the train horns and the noise that is, caused by the trains coming through to be something that one is concerned about when people are living without adequate shelter. And it seems like that amount of money could go into housing or other solutions for the homeless issues that Eugene is being faced with. So we would like we like the fences around town to be removed, and we like plans for any future construction of fences to be stopped. And many of us in our community are also interested in hearing what your plans and strategies are for implementing Housing First in our community. So thank you for your service. Thank you.
Thank you. Alicia Reed is next, followed by Arwen Mas Despain.
Hello, good evening. My name is Alicia Reed, and I am the chair of the Oregon CEDA Coalition. The Oregon CEDA Coalition supports the adoption and implementation of the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women as a municipal resolution at the local level and as part of the Cities for CEDA campaign. Mayor Piercy proclaimed November 16th, 2015 to be CEDA Day and International Day of Tolerance, and Eugene continues to make progress in its efforts to protect human rights of all members of this community with the city's goal of becoming a human rights city, and we celebrate this fantastic steps forward, and thank you. CEDA is a practical blueprint to achieve progress for women and girls, both locally and nationally. The American public strongly supports the principles and values of equality, fairness, education, and basic human rights. Further, it is clear that women are key drivers of any economy. They deserve equal access on all levels to fully implement their inherent skills and talents, which ultimately are critical components of the economic development and health of the country. Passing this resolution in support of CEDA will lead the way for other cities to do so. And as resolutions pass throughout Oregon, the implementation of state legislation based on CEDA principles will be easier to pass. This will then make it easier for other states to follow suit, and hopefully the nation. The Oregon CEDA Coalition is passionate and dedicated to the advancement of women's rights and well-being, and we're passing a resolution in support of women's rights as human rights is as easy as saying please and thank you. So please vote in favor of the CEDA resolution for the sake of women and girls in Eugene, and thank you so much for taking the time to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Arwen Mas Despain, followed by Katie Kruger.
Hello, my name is Arwen Mas Despain. I live in Ward 1. I work for Oregon Health and Science University, providing social services to children in Lane County who deal with chronic medical conditions. And I also volunteer for Occupy Medical, working with our community's most vulnerable members. Through the work with both those populations, I collaborate with local agencies and nonprofits who serve those populations. So I'm pretty familiar with what we have available here. I'm speaking to you tonight about the fences under the Washington Jefferson Bridge, very much from the perspective of somebody who works 24/7 with people right at the intersection of health and poverty. I understand how these issues are difficult to address and they're complex, and so we're all here trying to work together. If I had more time, I would speak at length about the fences really as a symptom of bigger problems with how our city addresses homelessness. But tonight I just want to tell you a story. So last November, when we had our first freeze and Egan warming centers were not able to open due to lack of volunteers, some friends and I got together some donations and we went to distribute them under the bridges. Right at the area where the new fence has been built, I met a couple that I wanted to tell you about. They were about in their late 60s. We jumped out of the cars and started giving things to people, and the woman approached, and so we got into some conversation, and she said, well, I asked her, what do you need? And she said, we really need to be able to stay here. And I said, well, why? And she said, because the cops had just come through and said that they needed to move along, and it was ice raining at the time. And she gestured to her husband, who was laying on a flat mattress on the ground, and explained that he had just been discharged from Riverbend from abdominal surgery, and he was trying to recover. And she just looked at me and said, you know, we can't keep moving. I need to be able to stay here. He needs to be able to recover. And it was pretty profound to me that this was the best option that they'd been able to find. And so I wanted you to consider what it might be like to try to recover from surgery under the bridge at Washington Jefferson. And also think of these people when you see the fences and what the fences represent. If our community is measured by how we treat our most vulnerable folks, what does it mean when we say we'd rather spend $67,000 to prevent them from being dry than to build places for them to be legally put their heads down? So I ask that you I'm excited about the Housing First measures, and I want to thank you for your service. Thank you.
Katie Kruger is next, followed by Vic Harrington.
Hello, everyone. My name is Katie Kruger, and I'm an officer with the Oregon CEDAW Coalition. In 1980, President Carter signed a treaty on behalf of CEDAW, the elimination of all forms of discrimination against women. And this has not been ratified by the United States despite his efforts and continued efforts over time. Today, cities around the country are striving to continue these efforts to ratify CEDAW within the United States by starting at the local level to pass and implement CEDAW as a resolution. CEDAW's mission to upholding state responsibility for achieving gender equality, eradicating discrimination, and ending violence against women within all sectors and all levels remains just as important today as it did when CEDAW was first established. Women still face challenges with discrimination, inequalities within the private and public spheres, in combination with major social issues that we face all around our state and within Eugene as well, including poverty, homelessness, racial and gender-based violence. The city of Eugene, by passing this human rights and gender-sensitive CEDAW resolution, which will show continued dedication to addressing these major issues, and in turn will help pave the way for other Oregon cities to continue these efforts and follow in the same footsteps. Eventually, Eugene's efforts could help the state of Oregon pass the first statewide CEDAW legislation in the United States. The city of CEDAW is striving to be known as the Human Rights City, which is an incredible achievement that represents this city's forward-thinking citizens and the city's work to achieve inclusivity and equity. Tonight, I would like to call on all of you to help continue this important legacy on behalf of women, girls, and communities throughout Eugene by supporting CEDAW as a resolution. Thank you all so much for your service and your time.
Thank you. Vic Harrington is up next, followed by Christine Sunt.
Good evening. I'm Vic Harrington. I'm in Betty Taylor's ward.
Get as close to the mic as you can.
Oh, I'm sorry. I do this each time. Okay, I'm in Betty Taylor's ward. I'm Vic Harrington. I'm the chair of SHENA with the Southwest Hills Neighborhood Association. I want to thank the council members who have supported the livability and wishes to have a community-based comprehensive process that would lead to a refinement plan. By now, you all should be familiar with the Oregon Consensus Report. Not surprisingly, trust and communication are seriously lacking. The Oregon consensus recommendation was to build trust, improve communication, develop mutual understanding. At a recent neighborhood meeting, a person in favor of the rezoning, as the city has proposed, said, well, you need to get everybody involved. We need to get everybody notified. Neighborhood associations don't have money anymore. We don't have the money to mail things. We get $1.58 per household per year. Not enough to do a mailing, no good mailings. And that's supposed to go down. So what we're asking, and I'm asking, is the city do a better part of communication, including not just the city staff's position. We need to have the neighborhood positions included in a very open and honest fashion. If we don't start doing that, this lack of trust is just going to get worse. So let's get on the same page. I think my first meeting with y'all was communication needs to be there. And that was back in September, I think. So let's do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Christine Sunt is next, followed by Richard Sunt.
Christine Sunt, Ward 2. Last month, Oregon Consensus released its report conducted on the proposed South Willamette Special Area Zone with neighbors and various stakeholders. The purpose of this assessment was to gauge whether or not to proceed with the plan, rather than to moderate differences or conflicts between parties. South Willamette Neighbors thanks the city and Oregon Consensus for documenting our concerns and findings. Quoting Tim Hicks, who with Turner Odell conducted the assessment, the report includes a recommendation for how to move forward. Everyone involved, city staff, elected officials, and community members found themselves dissatisfied with the situation as it had been arrived at. That the city requested an independent assessment and that community members were willing to devote the time and attention to meet with us suggests that everyone involved is motivated to find a constructive way forward. Hicks further states, the conclusions of our assessment relate to process. We suggest from a neutral perspective that the plan should not move ahead under the current conditions, but rather that a trust-building and joint fact-finding process be initiated so that the community members and the city can work together to move forward from the current impasse to future decision-making, whatever that might turn out to be. While reasonable people can disagree about substance, we have concluded that the health of the community and its ability to work together toward an acceptable solution to this very difficult situation will be furthered by a collaborative approach rather than the adversarial attitudes and practices that dominate many current interactions. Oregon Consensus reinforced the SWN position regarding the proposed plan. It's not ready for action, and much work lay ahead. Let's remember that this is not just a plan to beautify Willamette Street. The plan affects the livability of voters, especially 229 R1 properties, amid zone changes and densification. So it's time for the city to begin a process that trusts all impacted neighbors. Thank you very much.
Richard Sunt is next, followed by Corey Riddy White.
Richard Sunt from Ward 2. I'm speaking on smart planning for beauty, livability, and growth. The South Willamette Special Area Zone embodies many good concepts relative to Eugene's present and future needs. But as it stands, this is not smart planning. It is too much based on picking the lowest fruit, the easiest way, and that in the long run is not the best way for accommodating growth. In order to make the proposed plan work better, to be smarter, to be viable and realistic, it requires some modification. At the beginning of the planning process in 2009, participants did not want a document that would remain on paper, but one that would be actionable, one that would be implemented. Unfortunately, the resulting 83-page plan, when fully digested, is not actionable, nor is it fair. In my opinion, the plan calls for improvement rather than being relegated to the dustbin. Neighbors and city planners need to work respectfully, shoulder to shoulder, to render the plan actionable, implementable. This can happen by getting on board with smart planning on a number of logistical and design problems, while also crafting a sharing of the burden regarding density, something that is more equitable throughout the rest of the community. In this last regard, no planning scheme should adversely impact the workforce residents living in the large stock of affordable housing that exists along both sides of South Willamette. Smart planning should result in a plan that is truly actionable, socially just, protects the area's ecology, manages growth intelligently, and benefits citizens first and foremost. I close with one saying of Yogi Berra that speaks volumes to this issue. In theory, there is no difference between theory and practice. In practice, there is. Thank you.
Thank you. Corey Reyes White is next, followed by Jordan Katzif.
Good evening. My name is Corey Ray White. I'm in Councilor Taylor's ward, a staff attorney, program manager with our Children's Trust. As you know, 21 brave youth brought a landmark climate change lawsuit right here in Eugene. The youth have alleged that through the permitting, encouraging, and otherwise enabling continued exploitation, production, and combustion of fossil fuels, the federal government has violated their constitutional right to life, liberty, and property, and their essential public trust resources. Of course, the defendants brought motions to dismiss the plaintiff's lawsuit, claiming that the government has no constitutional right or public trust duty to protect essential natural resources. I'm thrilled to say that just 3 days ago, the court came back and denied the defendants' motions to dismiss. The plaintiffs will have their day. In denying the defendants' attempts to shut out the youth, Judge Coffin found that government action and inaction can violate plaintiffs' constitutional right to a healthy planet, and that valuing the lives and conveniences of today's adults over the lives of our young and future generations violates fundamental constitutional rights. Not only is this decision the latest in a slew of recent groundbreaking climate recovery developments seen across the world, but it's a huge hurdle cleared in our march towards recognizing a constitutional right to a stable climate. Legally, it's hard to overstate this decision's importance, and the youth and future generations are one step closer to starring in the trial of the century. And Eugene is one step closer to hosting that trial, with the focus of the world on him. The civil rights and marriage equality movements led to the end of city and business segregative practices. The disability rights movement led to the passage of the ADA and mandates upon cities and businesses to guarantee needed accommodations. The climate justice movement will lead to the end of public and private actions that threaten our right to a healthy planet. A major shift in planning practices will soon be required of cities across this country. Local governments will be required to take action to ensure our rights as citizens to a livable planet are not infringed. City budgets will soon reflect carbon budgets, and business as usual will not fly. Like it or not, Eugene right now is going to become the epicenter of a preeminent movement of our time. It means attention is going to be focused on you all, on the city, and the actions you take or don't take. You then have a choice. You can seize the opportunity and get out in front of this. You can give Eugene the opportunity to demonstrate what preserving the right to a stable climate at a municipal level looks like. or you can continue moving along at a snail's pace, lose out on the chance to be the model city, and scramble later when the federal government tells you what to do. Eugene can either wait and be told what to do, or they can lead and show how to do it.
Thank you. Jordan Katzup is next, followed by Jerry Ann Hampton.
Hello. All right. So my name is Jordan Katzup, and I'm a freshman at the U of O, and I intern for our Children's Trust. I'm here to discuss the implementation and action of the Eugene CRO. In 2014, the Eugene City Council adopted a climate recovery ordinance. Nothing like this had ever existed before it. However, here we are 2 years later, and the city has made scarce improvement in its climate recovery goals. In 2015, the city manager's office wrote a progress report tracking the progress made on the CRO, concluding that the CRO was in need of drastic updating and the city wouldn't be able to meet its own 2030 fossil fuel mandates. This report should be used not as an excuse to shirk duties, but as a means to engage the community, to ask for community assistance in meeting the CRO mandates. The community of Eugene wants swift and just change in how the city addresses environmental concerns and is ready to do its part, but you, as representatives of this community, must lead the city if change is to come. To say change is impossible or not feasible is incorrect. I recently researched carbon reduction efforts undertaken by other cities and found that, as just one example, the city of Fort Collins, a city much like Eugene with a population of around 150,000 and a college town, was not only able to meet its ambitious carbon reduction goals, but by establishing partnerships with the local power authorities, by building new solar and wind power, were able to generate over $27 million in local economic benefits. So to wrap it up, establishing a successful CRO in Eugene is possible and must be done. Eugene is a relatively small college town in the middle of Oregon that perhaps many believe won't be a huge part of affecting climate change. However, the city has the potential to set a precedent unlike any other. Implementing a successful CRO will set precedent over how other cities can improve their infrastructure and carbon footprint that can potentially spread nationwide and eventually create a sustainable and eco-friendly country. It may seem like a big idea. However, big ideas start somewhere, and the city of Eugene has already shown its ability to foster a few of them. Thank you.
Thank you. Jerry Ann Hampton is next, followed by Coroner McWilliams.
I'm Jerry Ann Hampton. I'm a retired teacher. I wanted to speak about the fences under the bridges. I know your responsibility is try to use all the taxpayers' funds in a constructive way to help all citizens, and I appreciate your efforts. I was just so appalled to see those fences go up because the money that they cost could have been spent to try to solve the problem. And it's not just misguided spending, it's contributing to a humanitarian crisis. We do not have enough affordable housing in Eugene, as you know, and our rents are higher than a lot of places that are comparable cities. Until we have enough places for people to shelter and lay their head, it doesn't help. We have no business building fences to keep them out of the rain. If somebody is out walking around on the streets in wet shoes and it's 40 degrees, shelters are not open. If they can't get under a bridge or under something, they're at risk of hypothermia and death. And as you know, Charles Egan died, and that's why we have the shelters for below 34 degrees. And I'm sure there are other people who have died that we don't know about. But I didn't want to just depress you. I also wanted to tell you I've heard about creative solutions that have actually saved cities money. The state of Utah did some research, and they figured out that with the money they spent on emergency room visits, police, social services, it was costing them about $20,000 a person, and they had a lot of people in Utah winters who were dying. and it cost them $11,000 to put somebody for a year in a low-income apartment, and their emergency room visits dropped 56%, which saved them a lot of money, and the police could focus on other things. In Austin, Texas, they have built tiny houses with a community garden and the houses do not have bathroom facilities. There are shared bathrooms, showers and laundry facilities, and a small library. So it's a community of people who now have a place to lay their head. Also, Medicine Hat, Alberta, has done the same thing. They have given everyone a very small, low-income apartment. And I saw an ad for a company building tiny houses, and they said for $67,000, they could build 200 tiny houses. And thank you.
So Coroner McWilliams is next, followed by Sage Fox.
Good evening, City Council. My name is Karina McWilliams. I live in Ward 3. As always, I'm here to encourage the Eugene City officials to continue taking measures to fully implement the Climate Recovery Ordinance. A few days ago, a landmark climate change case was passed wherein 21 youth plaintiffs confronted their federal government on the terms of violating their constitutional right to a healthy future. This is a huge victory for the general climate change movement, but by no means does that mean that our job as a community is any easier in ensuring a healthy environment for future inhabitants. The Climate Recovery Ordinance is more important now than ever. It is time for our leaders to begin following the example exhibited by Judge Coffin, who states that, quote, "The debate about climate change and its impact has been before various political bodies for some time now," end quote, also characterizing the case as a lawsuit addressing government action and inaction. Judge Coffin knew just how urgent this issue is, despite how daunting it may seem. We expect the same courage from our own local government. I care about the CRO because I know that this ordinance directly affects the chance that my generation has at a prosperous future, which cannot exist without a safe and habitable climate. Please do all in your power to uphold the CRO. Thank you.
Thank you. Sage Fox is next, followed by Eliza Kaczynski.
Hello, City Council. There we go. Hello, City Council. I'm here again, taking time out of my Monday night to ask you to please implement the Climate Recovery Ordinance. Climate change threatens to dramatically change life as we know it all around the world, causing severe natural disasters, sea level rise, extreme wildfires, and increased severe weather. And climate change already is beginning to wreak havoc and promises to kill countless people all around the world. And for this, Eugene, like every other city around the world, has an obligation to do its part to stop this. I personally love fishing, backpacking, and being outdoors, and climate change threatens all three of those. Wildfires are increasing in frequency and severity. Rivers are becoming too warm for trout to survive, and all around the environment is withering under the increased temperatures we're having. Soon it will be a matter of safety beyond a matter of whether my leisure is in jeopardy. For that, the youth of Eugene are counting on you to lead this fight against climate change, prevent this havoc, and to step up and act now and implement the climate ordinance. Please. Thank you.
Eliza Kaczynski is next, followed by Debbie McGee.
Hello, I'm Eliza Kaczynski. I live in Ward 1. I'm a member of We Can, the Walkable Eugene Citizen Advisory Network. We Can is a citizens group that supports walkable neighborhoods, housing options, and transportation options, as well as inclusive processes. This morning, We Can sent a letter to the City Council, Mayor, and the city manager supporting a facilitated trust-building next step in the South Willamette Special Area Zone process as recommended by Oregon Consensus in their assessment report. The outcome of the South Willamette process has a broad impact. The South Willamette Special Area Zone was initially a pilot, and it's important that we find a constructive process as its outcome will impact not just the residents of the specific neighborhood, but anyone who has an interest in the future of both that neighborhood and of all of Eugene. We would like to ask the mayor to launch and city council to support a facilitated process to build trust, improve communication, and develop better mutual understanding as the next step in the South Willamette Special Area Zone process. In particular, this process should be designed and facilitated by a neutral third party. The process should be seen as a first step to build trust and relationships between the various stakeholders in the process and reducing the adversarial conflict that has developed. And the process should be inclusive and open to the wide variety of stakeholders who are impacted by the outcome of the South Willamette Special Area Zone. We wish to support and participate in the constructive conversations that respect and balance all the differing opinions as Eugene wrestles with the difficult questions of how to shape our future as a community. We may have some different needs, but we also share some common goals, and we can figure this out. WeCan commits to support such a constructive process and invites other groups to do so as well. We ask the mayor and city council to assist with providing a productive forum for those necessary conversations. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Deb McGee is next, followed by Ann O'Brien.
My name is Deborah McGee. Eugene is my city. I've lived in the county on the same land for 30 years. I organized with 350 Eugene. 350 is the parts per million of carbon pollution that was in the atmosphere around 1970, when we lived in the age that flourished with birdsong, winged beans, and swimming beans. That age is gone. We are over 400 parts per million. 200 species go extinct every day, while our species continues to extract, transport, and burn the fossils pulled deep from the earth that are causing all this death and climate destruction. It is madness, friends. This we know. If we dig up and burn the known fossil fuels, we will overwhelm the planet's physical systems. We need to keep 80% of the fossil fuels in the ground and move toward a just transition to a 100% renewable energy now. We can't bribe or lobby physics to change the reality. We know it's time to dive deep into this necessary life-sustaining change to get off of the insane trajectory that we're on. This is an emergency. The time is now. In fact, we're late. We're very late. 2015 was the hottest year on record. There was no winter in the Arctic this year. The red light is on. It is change or die time. I am proud and thrilled that the City of Eugene has passed the first science-based climate recovery ordinance in the nation. But passing an amazing climate recovery ordinance and implementing it are two different things. Talk is cheap. Change takes planning, courage, commitment, and bold leadership. We need this bold leadership from the City Council, the mayor, from the city manager, and the city staff. We must adopt and implement a 350 part per million carbon budget. If we can do it in Eugene, we can do it in any city. We can do it in our state, in our nation, in our world. We can, we must, and we will reduce our carbon pollution to have a livable future for our children and our grandchildren. Thank you.
Thank you. Ann O'Brien is next, followed by Ken Newbeck.
Good evening. I am Ann O'Brien, and I am here representing Church Women United of Lane County. We'd like to go on record as in support of the City of Eugene passing Resolution 5150 to implement the principles of the UN Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, CIDA. Church Women United is recognized as a non-governmental organization by the UN. Our National Church Women United weighed in on this last year, reminding us that Jimmy Carter signed CIDA back in '79, and CIDA entered into force as a UN treaty in 1981. In fact, one of our organization's core priorities, justice, addresses and advocates that we work for the ratification and implementation of UN conventions that support the rights of all females, CEDAW. Women around the world have waited too long for the U.S. to ratify this. At the national level, Church Women United and other women's organizations are ready to take the lead in making CEDAW a reality in U.S. law and culture. Having our city adopt this resolution, 5150, is a good start right here in our own front yard. We are pleased to weigh in as supportive of this resolution. And on a personal note, thank you so much for your service. I'm in awe of all that you do, even though I don't agree with everything.
Thank you. Ken Newbeck is next, followed by Dennis Cassidy.
Good evening. My name is Ken Newbeck. I live in George Brown's ward. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. And I want to touch on two topics. One topic very encouraging to me, and the second topic making me rather angry. I'm encouraged that Councilor Taylor will be introducing a resolution in support of CEDAW. Cities in Oregon and across the United States have been similarly announcing their support or their consideration of this similar resolution. The hope being that the U.S. Senate will finally, after so many years, ratify the treaty and make it the law of the land. The human rights principles that are in CEDAW are very consistent with existing civil rights law in the United States, but two of its principles make CEDAW more far-reaching and effective than our civil rights laws. First of all, the implementation of CEDAW requires being proactive in seeking out discriminatory policies and practices affecting women, not waiting for complaints to come in. And I think that's very significant. Second, CEDAW implementation requires addressing policies and practices that are discriminatory against women in their impact. Never mind whatever the intention of these policies and practices are. So I believe that both of these principles and CEDAW in general is in line with the human rights framework that the city organization adopted, and I strongly urge the council to endorse the CEDAW resolution tonight. Another topic I just wanted to mention is one that makes me very angry. Volunteering at Occupy Medical on Sundays, which provides free health services to people who are extremely poor and often homeless. I see a lot of the consequences of the lack of emergency shelter for people in Eugene. The treatment team that we have there, doctors, nurses, and so forth, deals regularly with the acute and chronic physical illnesses of people who have no safe place and legal place to shelter themselves. From wound infections to skin diseases, from bronchitis to frostbite, from trench foot to cancer, people unsheltered suffer far more than those who are housed. On the mental health team, we deal with symptoms of trauma-induced PTSD, severe anxiety and crippling depression, often accompanied by physical illnesses. So it angers me when I see places where people can go to shelter themselves from the rain and from the inclement weather made impossible for them to access. And what I see happening then is an increase in our own caseload occurring at Occupy Medical, because basically what denying people shelter does is it makes them ill and it makes them unhealthy. Thank you.
Dennis Cassidy is next, followed by Phyllis Hockley.
My name is Dennis Cassidy. Thank you, Mayor, councilors, city manager. I'm also a member of We Can, but here tonight I'm speaking personally. I want to express my support for the South Willamette Special Area Zone. I've been involved in following this process for now over 5 years, as I have property that is directly and indirectly affected. City staff and the Planning Commission have spent countless hours working together with citizen input at roundtable discussions at the Amazon Community Center and open houses at the library to explain this proposal and answer questions. The city has run ads in the Register Guard to notify of these meetings. There's been a good attendance at the Amazon Community Center. Others may have thought it was more important to stay home, watch Survivor, The Bachelor, or Bachelorette. Because I felt it was important and it affected me, I attended every single one of these meetings over the last 5 years. When I felt it was necessary to say something, I did so at the beginning of those meetings, and it spoke, and if I spoke, they listened. I consider myself fortunate in the fact that I'm born and raised in Eugene. We have a desirable place to live here, and people are going to continue to move in here whether we like it or not. Oregon is the #1 state in the nation in which people have decided to move. That is backed up by statistics from North American Van Lines. It only makes sense financially that we should first build up and utilize the infrastructure that we already have rather than to expand the urban growth boundary and move further and further out. Most of us don't want to see another LA here locally. I don't. The Envision Eugene calls for a higher density along all major corridors. Willamette Street is a major corridor. The South Willamette Special Area Zone will allow for housing choices and 20-minute neighborhoods where people can walk, bike, work, and shop within the 20 minutes of their home. Thank you.
Phyllis Hockley is next, followed by Lori Powell.
Phyllis Hockley. I'm from Ward 7, and I'm from Church Women United. And one of our goals is that we are to act on behalf of women throughout the world. I'm also from St. Mary's Episcopal, where I see that everyone is welcome and all the gifts of all the people are welcomed, and I see how empowering this is. I'm also from a small farming village in Wisconsin. And while there, I drove tractor all day Friday, and then all day Saturday I was cleaning the house and baking cookies and cake. And I found out that roles can be reversed, roles can be both ways, and I found that seeing the equality in whatever you're doing was so important. I lived in Indonesia in a small village, and I helped start a preschool. And I got the women to be the teachers. This was a reversal of roles. But it was accepted in that village, which was something new, because they saw the importance of it and the benefit of it. And now here we are. Women have many gifts, and those gifts can be a win-win for all when they are accepted. So, I am in support of the City of Eugene passing Resolution 5150 to implement the principles of the UN Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. I see it as a win-win for all. So I'm asking you, I'm hoping you will support this. Thank you.
Lori Powell is next, followed by Linda Lynch and Kathy Eaton.
Good evening. My name is Lori Powell, and I live in Ward 1. I'm with 350 Eugene, and I'm here regarding the Climate Recovery Ordinance. The road through Paris was the phrase coined before the Paris climate talks held last December, implying that any agreement coming out of the talks would be insufficient to address the magnitude and the urgency of the climate crisis. Indeed, this May, the road through Paris is leading to dozens of actions against fossil fuel infrastructure worldwide, including at least a half a dozen here in the United States. And in the Pacific Northwest, hundreds of citizens, including several in this room tonight, are preparing to rally and risk arrest at an oil terminal near Anacortes, Washington, May 13th through 15th. You can find out more about Break Free from Fossil Fuels at our website, 350 Eugene. The road to Paris also leads here to Eugene and to this hall with all of you. It leads us back to the critically important climate recovery ordinance targeting science-based reductions in greenhouse gas emissions across city operations and our community. Our Children's Trust and 350 Eugene have initiated the process of more strategically organizing ourselves and our neighborhoods around working with each of you on the council and with the city manager's office to ensure that the CRO stays on track. Let us draw inspiration for this hard work from the recent decision by Judge Thomas Coffin allowing the federal court case involving 21 youth plaintiffs against the government and fossil fuel industry to move forward. And I'd like to conclude with a quote from Tim DeChristopher, as I think this gives us permission to bring the crisis to a more personal level. Inspiring action. It can be very overwhelming to think about what lies ahead in terms of the details of the CRO. So let's listen to Tim. He says, I'm involved in the climate movement because it's the only way I can show the people around me how much I really care about them and love them. So I fight for them and defend them against these great threats to their lives and livelihoods. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Linda Lynch and Kathy Eaton are up next, followed by Susan Cundiff.
Hi, I'm Linda Lynch and I live in Ward 1. And I'm here to urge your support for the CEDAW resolution tonight. So thank you to the council for taking it up, and thank you to Mayor Piercy for giving us a heads up about the topic. I'm here because I'm president of the League of Women Voters of Lane County. The League is also a part of the League of Women Voters of Oregon and the League of Women Voters of the United States. And we have a long history on the topic. The National League has been an active participant in many aspects of the work of the United Nations, including the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. The United States is one of the very few countries in the world that has not ratified this treaty, along with countries like Iran and Sudan. The League supports the Council resolution tonight, and to be clear, the League has supported similar resolutions in the past. Ratification of CEDAW would strengthen the United States' standing as a global leader in standing up for women and girls. It is essential that the United States ratify CEDAW and continue to play a leadership in advancing the rights of women and girls globally. The League's history is more than just getting women the right to vote and then working to see that they're informed voters. It includes work on international issues. In 1997, the League of Women Voters of the United States was granted special consultative status with the United Nations Economic and Social Council, which allows the League to participate with other NGOs on UN issues in which we have an interest. Prior to that, in 1995, the League was a participant in the World Conference on Women in Beijing, China. In 1999, the League co-sponsored a regional forum, Women 2000 Beijing +5, in advance of a special session of the UN General Assembly of 2000 on gender equality, development, and peace for the 21st century. With me is Kathy Eaton, who was a delegate to the 1995 conference and is a member of our board today. So I'll let Kathy talk to you about that, but thank you for listening to our position and for supporting that resolution.
I'm Kathy Eaton. I'm the governor's coordinator for the League of Women Voters of Oregon, but I was a delegate to both the United Nations conferences, the NGO part in 1985 in Kenya and 1995 in Beijing. And there, the women from the United States were questioned by the 30,000 women that came from all over the world as to why we had not ratified this very important piece of legislation on behalf of women. Since it was bipartisan effort not to have it in the Senate. So please, grassroots is necessary to get it going.
Thank you both. Next up is Susan Cundiff, followed by, it's either Stephen Dean or Stephen Deere. I can't tell which one.
Susan Cundiff, I'm in Ward 3. When my daughter was in middle school and in high school, she often posed the argument to me that everyone else was doing it, and so she ought to be able to too. And I would respond, no, I'm afraid not. Just because everyone else is doing it doesn't mean you get to also. Tonight I'm going to give you the opposite advice. Almost all other nations have ratified CEDAW. In fact, 189 of them. There are 7 nations that have not ratified it. The United States stands in league with Iran, Nauru, Palau, Qatar, Somalia, and Sudan. The only 7 nations who have not ratified CEDAW. It's time we jump on that bandwagon. And tonight you have an opportunity to make a statement for women's rights and human rights. When I looked at the history of CEDAW, I noticed that we first signed the convention in July of 1980, but we have not ratified it. Afghanistan signed that convention 1 month after we did in 1980. Their national parliament ratified it in March of '03. At that time, they had 0 women in their national parliament. They now have 28% women in national parliament. The United States currently has 19% representation of women in Congress. I think there are some things that we need to look at when it comes to discrimination of women in this nation and throughout the world, and you can make a statement that may nudge Congress to finally ratify this convention. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, up next is Stephen Dean or Stephen Deere, and after that is Todd, looks like Keyser.
Good evening. My name is Stephen Deere. And I live in Ward 3. Had I known I'd be speaking to you, I would have dressed better. And I'm here to speak against the fences. My wife and I just moved to Eugene from Chapel Hill, North Carolina last summer. We love our new hometown. Listen to the quality of the comments made to you tonight, I'm sure all the time, on climate change, on the UN resolution, and planning. You clearly represent a smart, engaged community. Before moving here, I read a lot about the history of Eugene. The image of Eugene that I have had and the well-earned reputation of Eugene that exists among friends of mine, community leaders in Chapel Hill, another college town, is of a community that values inclusion, diversity, and compassion, and of a city government shaped by decades of exemplary progressive community planning. None of those values are exemplified by the fences. Each fence is a symbol of failure of imagination and vision, symbols of a failure of smart leadership. After all the hours and hours of public input in your discussion about homelessness in Eugene that you have put in, you have to know that the fences offer no solution. I'd like to ask where this proposal came from. Was it staff-driven? Or did the people in the community call for this? Regardless, please reverse your decision. Thank you.
Todd Kaiser is next, followed by Brenda Kuran, it looks like.
Hi, my name is Todd Keyser, and I live in Ward 4. And I'm here also to talk about the fencing issue. And I guess the best way I can maybe address this is to say maybe it's time, a lot of you grew up in the same time frame I did. Maybe it's time for your views to mature a little bit. We grew up where we talked about bums and in an economy where the jobs weren't outsourced, when medical costs weren't ridiculous, when housing costs weren't ridiculous, and in a county where now the United Way says over 40% of Lane County is one paycheck away from being homeless. This is not the economy you or I grew up with originally. The homeless people are not travelers. They're your neighbors. They deserve dignity. They don't deserve fences. I think we can do better than this. I think the city manager can do better than this. Think of your neighbors, treat them with dignity, give them shelter, not fences. Thank you.
Brenda Coren is next, followed by Ashley Malarkey Wright. Brenda? Brenda's not here. Okay. Ashley Malarkey Wright is next. Ashley, followed by Linda Kelly.
Good evening. I'm Ashley Malarkey Wright. I live in Eugene, Ward 2. I'd like to share some ideas for efficient and effective uses of $67,000 in the management of public space. A few years ago, when there were spikes put on every ledge downtown that you could possibly sit on, I was very, shall we say, impressed. Last month, when I saw the fences going up around the dry areas of Washington Jefferson Park, I marveled at the beauty of them and the compassion that they symbolized. I think we should take this farther, and we should install loudspeakers that play calming sounds like chainsaw battles between howler monkeys. We can put these loudspeakers at every bench, every shade tree, every water fountain. And I know everyone has different tastes, so we can just sell or rent out remote controls that pause the noise, if that's your preference. Additionally, let's consider unicorns, because everyone loves unicorns. For $67,000, you can get the extra special kind. It's a unicorn that eats homeless people, and it poops out middle-class people. Thank you.
Linda Kelly is next, followed by Robert Farewell.
That's a hard act to follow. I live in Ward 1, and I'm here to basically nudge you all along in the implementation of the details of the Climate Recovery Ordinance. I've heard that there is a carbon budget being worked on, and I'm curious to know what the progress on that is and sort of the timeline that we can actually get to see what's being worked on. It would just help me to understand and us to understand what the real challenges are and where we can move ahead. I have a question for you, just to put out there is, I'm curious and don't really understand the discussion about widening the Beltline and how that can be part of a conversation when we really should know that we're in a climate crisis and we need new thinking, and just widening the Beltline is not going to get us there. So I don't know the details of it. I'd like to learn more about it. And something I heard in the news today, which I thought would maybe bring home the issue, because we're so used to hearing about the big disasters that are coming that I think they can be a little mind-numbing. But I don't know if anybody read in the paper that the Zika virus mosquitoes are in Menlo Park, and the Lane County health inspector had said that if we don't think it's going to make it here, we're all fooling ourselves. So it's just a little local reminder that yes, in fact, this really is happening. So I guess my ask of you tonight is to prioritize moving this forward. That means the budget and anything else that's needed to help us to help you get this moving. And that also, the city manager, I'd like to ask to really get on board with this too. I'm not sure what all the dynamic is there, but I know you play a really important part. So I'm personally asking you to really please engage and help move this forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Robert Farewell, and followed by Steve Coatsworth.
Hi there, everyone. I'm Robbie. I'm a student here at the University of Oregon. Councilor Clark, it's good to see you again. I took a class with you. I don't know if you remember Nuclear Warheads with Jane Kramer a while back. So I just wanted to speak about the prospect of Uber coming back into the city. I would, be someone that would definitely be interested in the idea of driving for them, but with some certain reservations. The idea of it is really exciting, especially with the changing schedule and the amount of work one day from the next, and be able to pick and choose my hours. But I would like to see if they were to come back into Eugene, they were to abide by Labor Commissioner Brad Avakian's advisory opinion with regards to treating the drivers like employees. And by the nature of the work, it really makes sense when you look at the fact that most of the drivers aren't allowed to give out their own cards. They have no discretion with regards to the pricing. They're also really at the mercy of the app. For instance, you could have a couple passengers that may have been drunk, may have been just grumpy on the day, and then gave you poor ratings. But then all of a sudden, Uber kicks you off, and there's really no extra insight as to why those ratings were the way that they are. So I'd like to express my interest in it, but some initial caution. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Steve Coatsworth is next, followed by Bill Watkins.
Thank you. I'll try to keep it pretty brief. So I'm here to talk about the same issue. Oh, I'm Steve Coatsworth. I do a lot of things locally. It's hard to choose just one hat, but I am the campaign services chair of the local Democratic Party. I have been looking at this issue for a long time. I grew up in Eugene, in West Eugene, in Councilor Evans's area, and I know a number of taxi drivers. And first of all, I just wanted to commend you all, because I think that you really did take Uber to task when they tried to bulldoze us and circumvent the process of local government. You're literally our last defense against a $60 billion company with multi-million-dollar lawyers coming in and telling us how we're going to run our city and how we're going to treat our workers. And I appreciate the work that you did to try to make sure that that didn't happen. When it comes down to it, I met with the city planning department, and they've been working really, really hard. And just sort of from a process perspective, I did ask when I was there with a couple representatives from the university running various campaigns, as well as LCC board member of the AFL, and the secretary of the party and some other folks, as well as a couple of taxi drivers. And they had said that they had met with all of the stakeholders involved. And I said, okay, so what did the taxi drivers have to say about, the proposed rules, or what did the taxi drivers have to say about letting Uber in? To which there wasn't really a response. And I said, you did talk to the people whose lives are going to be directly impacted by this change, right? And they said that the cab companies were actually keeping all of their drivers abreast of what's happening, to which the cabbies said no. If anything, it's the exact opposite. So, I think that from a process perspective, we really ought to be looking at that. I have given all of you a memorandum from a University of Willamette law professor talking about all the various cases that have been happening with Uber and his concerns about it. Particularly, if the planning department is going to update the PPV code for the first time in 50 years, I think that we've been under Title III American with Disabilities restrictions for the last quarter century, and that should be toward the top of their list to make sure that a group like Uber doesn't come in. I would refer you to see what's happening in Portland. An investigative reporter said that there's never ever an ADA vehicle accessible. My primary concern, though, is how Uber treats its drivers and the fact that we have no control over it and that they're not even based here. If I have a problem with how, Oregon Taxi runs, I can walk into their office on 7th and I can talk to them. And I just think that we need to exercise extreme caution. And the one ask that I would say, as somebody that is most concerned about the drivers performing the work and that they don't get exploited, is that we should take our cue from Labor Commissioner Bradabakian. Thank you.
Bill Watkins is next, followed by Juliana.
I'm Bill Watkins from Ward 2. I left copies of what I'm about to read on the table for each one of you. My wife and I have lived at 3325 Kincaid Street for 38 years. Several years ago, the Hideaway Bakery and the Paddock, 3377-3355 East Amazon, began to play loud, amplified music in the evenings, usually on Tuesdays. The noise funnels between the houses to the point where we must close our windows. We're about a block away, when we would rather leave them open, and turn on a fan or something to block it out. I'm surprised the city allows such noise in a residential area. Imagine what the people who live on the west side of Alder Street have to put up with. If my neighbor played music that loud, I could call the police. They would put a stop to it. Is it somehow okay as long as it's good for sales? And I have nothing against the businesses. We sometimes eat at Mozzie's. We ate Hideaway bread tonight. But they should be required to keep their noise indoors, or at the very least be limited to acoustic music with some kind of a orchestra shell or whatever to aim it to the west and to where the customers are sitting. In June last year, I canvassed the neighborhood and found several people who felt the same as I do. But that should be irrelevant. This used to be a quiet neighborhood, but now I begin to dread the summer Tuesdays. Thank you.
Juliana is next, followed by Wayne Martin.
Good evening. Mayor Piercy, city councilors, hello. My name is Juliana, and my business partner and I live in Ward 3. Our business is located in Ward 1. We are the owners of the Starlight Lounge. You may have heard of it. We wrote a letter to you yesterday regarding the redevelopment of the Rogue Brewery building. Since then, we have had limited time to review the URA agenda item summary and speak to Doug Bulsky, the project manager. We have not had sufficient time to review the URA summary, as we were only made aware of its existence yesterday after reading about the project in the Register Guard and doing our own research. At no time did the City of Eugene Planning Department or the project developer reach out to us or provide any advance review of the proposal. We need time to review the documents with our attorneys. The lot line division being proposed is confusing and in no way reassures us that our leased premises will be protected in any way. While we are enthusiastic, very enthusiastic about the addition of housing downtown, much needed housing downtown, there has been limited inclusion of us and our neighbors in this process. Please vote no on the disposition of real property to sell the south half of tax lot 170-33113-4200 to Granite Properties in order to give everyone more time to review the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Wayne Martin is next, followed by Christian Fox.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm Wayne Martin. I have moved from Washington Street over to Keeler Avenue, so I'm now a resident of the Harlow district, Harlow neighborhood. But I miss George Brown's ward. I made a couple notes while I was listening to speeches tonight, and I think I'd like to just speak to those notes. I've been at this microphone quite a bit in the last 4 years, talking about homelessness, giving ideas, suggestions. But it's occurred to me that I don't think I've ever really dwelled with you on the importance of looking into your hearts when you think about or pass homeless people. I don't blame you in some ways, you're busy. and also you're problem solvers. So you generally tend to exercise your brain, mostly the left side of it, because you're problem solvers. It's possible that all the ideas in the world aren't going to get to your heart unless you focus on letting the homeless themselves get to your heart. I would recommend an exercise over the next week. Maybe you can do 2 or 4, and that is each morning as you drive on your way around the city, open the heart to those you see who have no better place to live than on the street. Let that heart of yours expand to the point where some of your best ideas you may not have had yet because they haven't come from your heart. And your best ideas, let's face it, do come from your heart. I read a lot about what other cities are doing, and some things have been mentioned tonight. It's clear that the progress, radical progress that's made towards hospitality of the homeless are from councils like this who have acted from their hearts. I'm excited about what you might do if you focus primarily on the heart in the next 2 to 4 weeks. There's a proposal being talked about now called Tents for 10. That's an idea, but it needs heart. So let me leave it at that and encourage you to exercise your heart.
Thank you. Christian Fox is next, followed by Kamala Sugar.
Mayor, City Councilors, I'm Christian Fox. I'm a business owner downtown, and I live in Ward 1. I'm talking to you tonight about the Rogue building that has been for sale and vacant for over a year in downtown Eugene. When the property went under contract to be developed, unbeknownst to the property owner, and it would appear to be multiple property owners prior, there is an encroachment at the back that is presently being, or has been used in the past as a smoking deck and beer garden and a place for dumpsters about the width of the building. It was determined that the city had forgotten that this property was owned by them, and the building owners had forgotten that they had an encroachment and an easement permit that had long expired and was kind of in a no man's land zone. In the course of going forward with trying to resolve the use of this area in the course of the development, city staff did a good job identifying who owned the property, and for the width of the building only, it was proposed to sell off that portion of the city parcel for the project to go forward. Tonight, before you, you have an opportunity to decide to convert the sale of a beer garden and smoking deck and dumpster area to a development that's dynamic, adds workforce housing to downtown, fits with the goals of urban density and urban renewal zone. And I would say that the piece that you may not be aware of is that there's a contract deadline. The contract expires this Friday. So I encourage you, if anything, to consider moving forward on a yes vote tonight. Thank you.
Kamala Sugar is next, followed by Scott Bartlett.
Good evening. I'm Kamala Sugar. I live in Ward 2. I am proud to serve as the chair for Planned Parenthood Advocates of Oregon, which pushes for policy changes that have made Oregon the leading state for reproductive freedom and birth control access. We strongly support the United Nations commitment to ending discrimination against women in this world. Globally, 225 women and girls who wish to delay or plan childbirth still lack access to modern contraceptives, and pregnancy is the leading cause of death for adolescent girls worldwide. with nearly 70,000 killed annually from complications related to pregnancy and childbirth. In many places, women of reproductive age, especially adolescent girls and young women in sub-Saharan Africa, face disproportionately high rates of HIV infection. HIV prevention options, including comprehensive sexual and reproductive health services, must be reliable and accessible all over the world. Women still face far too many unacceptable challenges, but here in the United States, we have a long way to go as well. Last year, I was honored to meet with Attorney General Ellen Rosenblum and a delegation from the United Nations Working Group on Discrimination Against Women in Law and Politics. These human rights experts from Poland, the United Kingdom, Costa Rica, China, and Israel spent 10 days visiting across the United States. They visited Oregon, Alabama, Texas, and Washington, D.C., among other places. They evaluated a wide range of United States policies and attitudes, as well as school, health, and prison systems. What they found was alarming. As they wrote in their report, in global context, United States women do not take their rightful place as citizens of the world's leading economy. Women fall behind international standards as regards their public and political representation, their economic and social rights, and their health and safety protections, end quote. For reproductive health and rights in particular, the UN group praised Oregon for being one of only a handful of states that require sexual health education to be medically accurate. But they expressed deep concern about the 136% increase in U.S. maternal mortality rates between 1990 and 2013. Meanwhile, in states like Texas paint a grim picture of what could become reality for women across the country if there is continued restriction of access to safe legal abortion. Researchers estimate that up to 240,000 Texas women have tried to end a pregnancy on their own without medical assistance.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Last up is Scott Bartlett.
Madam Mayor and members of the council, my name is Scott Bartlett. I live in Alan Zelenka's ward, and I could come here to talk about the train abatement. I actually would not be in favor of that. If it would save even one life by not doing it, I'm in favor of not doing it. I could come and talk about how we need a new animal shelter because we have dungeons for dogs, but that's another conversation. I could come, Madam Mayor, and ask you to follow up on the flying people who were taken from the airport, and I wonder when they're going to go back to the airport. But I'm here to talk briefly about the city hall, and not in anger, and not trying to gotcha, and not trying to cast blame on anything. But I didn't have a so-called, I don't want to use the image dog on the fight, but I didn't have a horse in the race with respect to keeping the old city hall, which had its arguments, or the new one. The council in its wisdom chose to do that. But I remember at the time that it was rationalized for doing it based on seismic reasons, that the other one was dangerous and to retrofit it would be non-cost effective, et cetera, et cetera. And so a lot of us would deferred to that. But one of the things that we were told was that there would be city council offices there. That was clearly told. And I must say I was a little bit, say what, kind of reacted when I saw dear Jan Bauman on the news saying, well, it's not going to happen anymore. I just wonder, is this city council chopped liver? Does the tail wag the dog here? At some point down the road, long after I have passed from the scene, hopefully to my next great reward, this town will be what Portland was perhaps in the early 70s in terms of population. And presumably we will change to maybe a city commissioner form of government. It seems reasonable to me if we envision not only having this city hall but an annex, and then, as Chris wants, the county courthouse and all this thing to fill that block, that you do it right the first time. And I must say, if the city councilor offices were going to be on the 3rd floor, why all of a sudden do they have to be on the 4th floor? What was responsible for these changes? And if the rationale for doing it and the envisioning of doing it for the price that was represented was for retrofitting and ensuring for earthquake protection, why all of a sudden did this change? And I'm not necessarily opposed to it, and if the money's there, fine. But I think there's some questions that need to be answered, because I do think there's a little bit of a trust factor, not necessarily with me, but I do hear it grumbled out in the community. Kitty, now you've earned a gate. I hear somehow Kitty Gate. So it's not your fault, but I do think it should be explained. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's your Kitty Gate.
Kitty Gate.
Take that as a badge.
Okay. All right, I'm going to close the public forum and ask for comments, and I'll start with Councilor Evans.
Thank you, Mayor, and I'd like to thank everyone who came out tonight to give testimony, express their opinions on a number of issues. A couple of things that I want to address. I will be putting forth the motion for the CDAW resolution, but one thing I want to be very clear about, and that is that we need to walk our talk. And that means that if we are going to support, a resolution for equal rights and equal opportunity for women, then we need to do that across the board, and particularly as a city. If we are not contracting with women and minority-owned businesses in a way that is significant, then we are not walking our talk. We can pass every resolution that we want, but when we have a conversation about, City Hall, and I asked about contracting as my first question, the response was, well, we have one woman contractor so far on the project. That's not sufficient. When we're building a $100 million MX project in West Eugene, and there's less than 2% participation by women and minority contractors, that's a problem. And we need to have effective goals and aspirations and policies in place as a city that reflects our so-called talk. We need to walk our talk. That's one issue. And second issue and I've been on this council 3 years, and involved in the Human Rights Commission and addressing issues of homelessness even before that. But why have we not, and this is a city and county issue, had the analysis that says, how much does homelessness cost us with the activities that we have with regard to police, fire, and fire is important in this because they're the first responders when someone gets ill or sick on the street, our effective parks and other parts of our city infrastructure as well as county infrastructure versus investing in shelter. I would say that probably we would find that the analysis would show that we would get more bang for our buck by investing in housing than we would by continually adding expenses to our infrastructure and services both at the city and county level. So those are just two issues that, I think are important and definitely important to me, and I hope to some of my colleagues on this dais as well.
Councilor Zelenka.
Thank you, Mayor. I was very happy to see the Our Children's Trust case victory with Judge Coffin this week, where he allowed the lawsuit to go forward and based on the public trust doctrine. That indeed is groundbreaking. I'm looking forward to hosting the trial of the century, so good luck on that one. On the mayor's ad hoc committee on the climate recovery ordinance, my apologies I already gave to the mayor, but I'll give it to the rest of you. I've been negligent in getting that organized, and I promised the mayor I'd get her that proposal by the end of the week. And actually, we have made a lot of progress in implementing, but we haven't figured out exactly how to best way to report that back out to folks. For example, we've been changing out all of our street lights to LED, using a heck of a lot less energy and reducing greenhouse gases, fleet fuel savings, and other things that we've been doing. But we need to figure out how to tell people about it. And as part of that ad hoc committee, we'll be figuring out how to report this out, but also move it forward. And indeed, we already actually have one of the cleanest electricity portfolios in the country, and with our hydro and our wind portfolio, and lowest greenhouse gases in any part of the country almost. And with the laws that phase out our coal plants, we'll be further blowing away Fort Collins in their work, which is actually coal country. And Eugene is also, I just wanted to point out that Eugene is actually leading the country in a lot of these homelessness issues. In fact, the Opportunity Village, which was actually featured more than almost 2 years ago now on Bill Moyer's show, is actually being replicated by both Medford and Corvallis, so people are starting to catch on building these tiny house communities. And I saw this, people keep talking about Utah, and I listened to this thing on KLCC on NPR about Utah the other day, and I was wondering, how the heck did they do that? And one of the things that sparked my attention and was surprised to hear was they only had 3,000 homeless people identified in Utah. 3,000. We have 1,500 here in Eugene. And so I think there's a scale difference in what they were able to do. So that's something to take into consideration. This weekend I had the opportunity to tour Occupy Medical. And what Sue Saralupe and others are doing is simply amazing, what they've been able to do there, what they pulled off and what they're doing in downtown every Sunday. And over 60 volunteers, nurses, doctors, counselors like Ken Newbeck and others doing wound care and medical exams and giving out food and hygiene packets and things like that. They really deserve your support. And so if you can help with supplies or volunteering or toilets or just a few examples of things that they need, I think it would be very much worth your while. And then finally on Uber, we asked them to do 3 safety things that they have yet to do, which is, can I just say the 3 things?
No.
Okay.
Okay, Councilor Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank everyone for coming down. It's always very good to hear from you. We have not done very much for homeless people this year. We, in spite of all of our talk and patting ourselves on the back, we created 20 new camping spaces and 20 spaces for car campers. That's a total of 40. That's all we've done in a year. And so, yes, an Opportunity Village works very well, and we need to replicate. I mean, other people are copying us. We need to have many more of those. Costs? What is it costing us? I don't know about police and fire and the emergency room at the hospitals, but if put up some fences around the bridge, that's $67,000. We had a report from the Parks Department a couple months ago. They spent $250,000 last year, just in 1 year, cleaning up 715 homeless camps along Amazon Creek and the Willamette River. So you add those two together, and that's over $300,000 right there, but not knowing the other costs. And so, that's about, if we could take that money and spend that on the homeless people in Eugene, that'd be about $200 a person. Surely we could find shelter for all those people at that rate. I mean, that just shows you the magnitude and how little actually we have done. We need to really step it up. And I have asked for a list of city-owned surplus property several times, and the only one that we got was years old. And so I'm going to ask again, and I'll do this formally in an email too, but I would like to know all the property that the city owns that's vacant. There's vacant buildings. couple that I know of for sure. And I know we use these other filters, can't be near school, can't be, but I'd like to see all of the city surplus property without any filters and just know what all the parcels are in all of the buildings. And then I think we need to step it up and spend a little more money, and because otherwise, at this rate, we're probably falling behind. We're not gaining on the problem. Thanks.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you. Thanks to everyone who spoke. I really admire the way you spoke and the way people stand up for themselves and for other people. South Willamette neighbors have been really active, and I think that is excellent. We certainly need shelters. I agree with the person who said the money we spent on fences should be spent on shelters. And I do also agree that shelters are more important than a railroad quiet zone, I think. And they don't have to be fancy. If people just had a place to stay warm and dry, and a shared facilities, it's better than being outside. Every time I go home when it's cold and open the door for my dog and me, I think, I'm so glad we have a place to get warm. And I think of people who I've just seen out in the park somewhere, lying on the ground. So one place where they could at least keep dry, we're fencing off. Places where people could sit, we've destroyed the benches, and then they lie on the ground and they're criticized for being on the ground. Another thing, the noise, and I love the Hideaway Bakery, but the noise at night, I agree, it's a nuisance to the neighbors, and it's been going on for years. I think that there must be, I did speak to the city manager about this recently, there must be something we could do about the volume or the length of time or something, or both, actually. And I want to say I enjoyed the Ashley satire. It reminded me of a modest proposal. Thank you.
So I want to thank everybody for coming.
Mayor, can I get in the queue, please?
Yes, go ahead. Councillor Surratt.
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to address the fences issue, since that's a park in my ward and in my neighborhood. And I suspect my comments won't be very satisfying to those who spoke against the fences tonight, but I offer them anyway. As many of you know, I've been a strong and consistent advocate for creating more shelter of all types for our most vulnerable residents. The city is working hard in partnership with the county to implement Housing First and to expand our emergency shelter options. This week, the county issued a request for proposal for a community outreach case manager who would work specifically with homeless residents to triage their situations and try to connect them with shelter. That's just one example. But we need more funds from the state and the federal government, and it's going to take time to build more housing of all types before we will be in a position to provide safe, permanent shelter for all our homeless residents. In the meantime, the city is placed in a very challenging position when homeless residents who are left with very few options end up essentially living in our parks. And these parks are meant to be used by all of our residents, and many of these residents find it difficult to enjoy and in some cases even use their parks when these camps negatively impact their park and the neighborhood. So we end up in conflict. The sites that were fenced off in Washington Jefferson Park were left in terrible condition by the people who use them, in spite of the fact that this is a park that has trash cans, restrooms, and an HIV Alliance-sponsored needle disposal box. So city staff made the hard decision that they needed to limit access to those areas instead of continuing to clean them up. The fact is that the one-time cost of those fences would represent only a small fraction of the cost of providing ongoing housing for all of our homeless residents. So we are working hard to bring more resources into the community to fund ongoing shelter and permanent housing. But until that happens, I'm afraid we are going to continue to experience these kind of challenges and conflicts.
Thank you. Anybody?
Mayor, I just have a quick update as well on a couple things. Just on the homeless issue, we shouldn't forget that last year there was a broad community coalition that actually ensured that 404 veterans and their families who otherwise would have been homeless or not, and hopefully most or all of them will stay housed. And so I think that actually is quite a significant accomplishment by this community around this particular topic. Councilor Evans, at your urging, there is a work session on June 22nd about minority and women-owned businesses. And the other contract we should have mentioned, and we had forgot to mention it, significant oversight. Actually, the entire demolition is led by a women-owned business, and that was $2 million worth of what's been currently spent so far. And so that has been a pretty significant piece of that as well.
Good to know.
So just want to say a big applaud for Children's First and the work that's been done. It's amazing. We're so proud of you, so proud of the effort that's been made. It comes from our community. It's a great thing. Also want to say that we are so looked at for some of the innovative work that our community has done here on tiny houses and housing options. At Boulder's coming here soon to take a look at what we're doing. Housing First works, but we lack, even when we were doing our vets, they had vouchers in their hands to move into apartments, and there were not enough apartments for them to move into. So one of the issues that we know is being talked at state level, and we certainly talk about it a lot here, is we need to have more units to move people into to meet the need that's there, and that we actually have the means to pay for. Other than that, and the other thing I think you're going to find out with the homeless count this year is that the number of homeless vets is going to go way down this year because of the work that's been done in housing our homeless vets. So we will see that. I can't tell you what you'll see in the rest of it, because as you watch today, San Francisco, LA, Seattle, it doesn't matter who you're talking about, they are having a very, very, very difficult time dealing with this issue. And I feel remiss in having this conversation at all without saying that it comes down to us from the federal level. It comes down to us from economic decisions that are made far beyond our borders, and we have to grapple with that. But the real rectification of homeless people and economically disadvantaged people has to come from decisions that you make in the election process, and has to come from how we deal with this at the federal level. And we have to do our part in the meantime, because these are people we care about, and we need to do our best. I do know that when we talked about getting reports back on how we're doing with our carbon budget, we talked about the interval of getting our reports back in front of us, and that they didn't need to be long, but we wanted to know what was happening all the time. And we want to know, but we also want the public to know. So I just want to be sure we're staying on track with bringing those kind of reports back here on a regular basis. And I don't know if you know, John, how much information is on our website currently about all of that, and when people can find out what we're doing and those kinds of things. So
I don't know what that is, but if it isn't, we need to post some of that. So
I think we should make it a priority. It's very hard for people to think we're doing something when they can't go find it. And so even if we are doing it, if they can't see it, it's not going to be very satisfying. Okay, and as far as Uber goes, and I think you're already doing this, but I would just say anybody who's interested in this should be in there being heard from during the rules-making process, so that we hear from people about that, and we come out with the best product possible. Thank you all very much. Yes, did you? Yes. I want to just say that we're going to do first the consent calendar. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I move to approve the items on the consent calendar.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, please indicate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Councilor Surratt?
Yes.
Okay, 8 in favor, none in opposition. It passes. Now, I did ask Councilor Taylor to move the CDAW resolution, so I'm going to let her say whatever comments she wants to say, and then she can launch it.
Thank you. Should I comment first or read the resolution?
Comment first.
Comment first. Okay. This is really important. I'm glad that we're doing this, and it's rather shameful that our country hasn't done it before. But something I hadn't even thought of until tonight was reproductive rights as a big example of women's rights that are being threatened actually all the time. That was another aspect. And I will read and I think, well, I shouldn't say that. I started to, almost was saying we don't have very many women up here, but that's another matter. Okay, I move to adopt Resolution 5150, supporting the Oregon CEDAW Coalition by the City of Eugene, Oregon, and support of other states and cities passing resolutions and ordinances to implement the principles of the United Nations Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, CEDAW.
Second.
Moved and seconded. I want to say how appropriate I think this is today. If you saw the editorial in the paper today talking about the difference in wages that what women earn and as opposed to their male counterparts, I thought it was a perfect day for this. So.
Yes, if I had time to talk, I could tell you a lot of things. I remember, no, I mean about my own experiences. When I worked at the telephone company in 1948, I found out that I was a service representative, and the men who did the same job were called business representatives, and they made almost twice as much as we did. When I asked the reason, I was told men have to support families, and that's just one thing. We've come a long ways, but there's still things that need to be done. There's still inequality, and the reproductive thing is a big example. Thank you.
Hey. Further comments? Okay, ready to vote on this? All those in favor, please indicate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Councilor Surratt?
I vote yes.
8 in favor and none in opposition. It passes. Thank you all very much. That's great. So next up is the issue of disposition of real property. I'm going to adjourn the meeting of the Eugene City Council and convene a meeting of the Eugene Urban Renewal Agency. And before we move into that, city manager, and I'd just like to understand, I just heard there's a timeline issue here. I've also heard that there's an issue around people not being aware of this and needing more time. So I want to understand, I'd rather not spend an hour's conversation if we need to just make more time for us to deal with this.
Right, and I'll ask Nan to just kind of do a quick overview of the project. She can try to answer some of those questions and sort of a little bit about the process we've been through.
Good, thank you. So the action before you tonight is the sale of a portion of a small parcel owned by the Urban Renewal Agency that's adjacent to properties that front on Olive and the two alleys at the back, West 8th and Olive Alley. The property has been used as a service court for an outdoor seating area and trash collection area, pretty much for the Rogue property and for the Starlight. So the developer, Granite Properties, is in negotiations to buy the former Rogue L building with the intent of renovating and re-tenanting the first floor and then building housing units above. In order to develop the housing units, they're looking to expand the footprint by reaching out to that 50 feet, the portion of the Urban Renewal Agency property. And so they've submitted a purchase offer for half of the URA property owned at the back of the building, and their goal is to build approximately 36 units. So the developer has requested action on this item this evening. Because their redevelopment project is contingent on acquiring the URA parcel, they've stated their need to secure site control of that parcel before finalizing the terms with the seller. And they've indicated to us that the deal is time sensitive. So we've been communicating with the owners and tenants of the adjacent properties for the last couple of months. They've raised concerns specifically about trash pickup, service delivery, emergency egress, and their back patio area. So to address those issues, we worked with Granite Properties to amend their concept to only buy half of the Urban Renewal Agency property so that there would be continue to be access for the second half as needed. Solar access was also mentioned, but it's not regulated for downtown commercially zoned properties. So if tonight's action is for approval, then Granite Properties has stated their intent to apply for a multi-unit property tax exemption, which will need to be approved by City Council. If the sale of the ORA parcel is not approved, or if the MUPD application isn't approved by City Council, then Granite Properties states that the project will not move forward. If there's approval on both the sale and then later on the MUPD by City Council, then, but not sufficient progress being made, then the agency reserves the right to purchase the property back. Thank you. I'm available for questions.
So, in answer to what I was trying to ask when we started, did we have conversation with Starlight ahead of time?
We had conversation with the broker and the owner of the building, and the owner of the business of Starlight, Jody Moyne, was copied on emails back in February.
Okay. All right, then. I've got Councillor Clark and Councillor Evans in the queue. Councillor Clark.
I have great respect for the work that you guys do. And for you and you personally. I've heard a different story from people whose opinions I value about the level of contact with the folks at the Starlight. So understanding the amount of money and effort that they've put into making that a nice place, and certainly I don't ever want us to think that to be in the business of deciding, okay, we're going to destroy this business to help this one get bigger. That's not our role, and we should never do that. So they have some strong concerns. And my problem here is I don't ever like to negotiate with a gun to my head, and that's what I feel like I have with the clock here, you know? So I'd really prefer that we had a chance to talk about this a little more and understand from both sides what their concerns are. And I don't know how to move forward. And can you help advise me in my thinking here on this process?
Could the city manager, you want to respond?
You know, we can also have this conversation on Wednesday as part of your work session, which would also apparently meet this Friday deadline, if that's the deadline for the property owners, or for the proposers.
In that case, I move to table this until Wednesday.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. There's no debate. All those in favor, please indicate. 1, 2 in favor. In opposition? Yes.
Well, this is Claire. I vote in favor of tabling.
3 in favor of tabling.
Either you voting yes or
no. Trying to vote no.
So you understand what we're voting on is tabling it so we don't make this decision tonight. That's what we're voting on. Everybody understands that?
Yeah, I understand it, Mayor. I'm just having a little bit of angst, right? But
Okay.
I'll support tabling. So you got a fourth vote.
4. Anybody else? Nope. In opposition? 4.
Discuss a little more tonight.
I think I'm going to vote no because I think we should have a majority vote from council. So we're back to discussing this.
Okay, Mayor?
Yes. Councilor Evans?
I think I'm next in queue. Thanks, Mayor. Well, one, I need to declare a potential conflict because my employer has property that is adjacent to or not directly adjacent, but in the general vicinity of the proposed purchase. The second thing is, and the question that came up to me today was the fact that that this proposed development is a 5-story development, correct? And that could potentially obscure the transmission access from the KLCC tower that is in the direct vicinity of this proposed development. So if that is true and that is the case, then, you know, what would go from there would be a potential of having KLCC move its transmitter, and that would require some FCC action and other things. And so there would be, you know, other ramifications, potentially financial costs that the question would be, what would the new property owner incur? Who would take care of those kinds of issues? There's a number of different issues that arise from the potential development that's here, plus the impact on other surrounding properties and businesses.
Two parts to that, or two responses to that the comment. Number one, I spoke with Brett Roulette from LCC, and he let me know about the transmission issue. He also let me know that it's something that they would look into, and they would see what the costs were, and we started talking about the possibility of a downtown revitalization loan to cover that. We hadn't gotten in any further than that, so we didn't have the conversation of the developer possibly covering that cost. And then the second part of that is in this zone, C3 zone, so it by right could go to 150 feet.
Okay. Councillor Taylor?
Thank you. I voted against tabling till Wednesday because I think it's going to take more time than that, and I don't want to spend time discussing it on Wednesday. I don't like, if we're going to sell property, we should consider first, should we sell it, and then we should see if the other people want to buy it for better reasons, if it's for sale. And we need to know all the aspects of it, and Wednesday is not a good time to decide, is not long enough. I want to know about this deadline. We've been asked before to decide on something, and all of a sudden there's a deadline. And I don't like this being pushed to make a big decision quickly. What is the deadline? What's the deadline for?
I'll give my understanding of what the developer has stated. That they've already negotiated 2 extensions to their purchase offer, and that they're trying to finalize the negotiations with the seller, and that right now is what we've been told is the contract date, April 15th, or they have to renegotiate. But again, we've been told that the seller is more reluctant to renegotiate because they're not making progress on this project.
Who's the seller? Are we the seller?
The owner of the Rogue building, yes.
Who?
The Rogue is selling that.
The Rogue
building.
is selling it to the person who, and in order to help them, we're asked to rush a decision. Right. Thank you.
Councillor Zelenka?
Yeah, I don't understand why the council's being put in the position of having to inappropriately rush to make a decision, and because of a deadline not of our making. So if pushed, I'm going to push back. I also have a question about the price. $35 a square foot is determined by the buyer. What is our due diligence on that in terms of, other than just the comparison to the shed property at $32? And then also have concerns about the neighbors' concerns and the notice. It seems to me we've got this recurring problem about notice, and it seems like we're not doing something right. And then finally, I was talking to Councilor Evans about the KLCC antenna, and that is a big deal. I think if it's shaded, it points south, and if it's out of line, it cuts off access to a lot of listeners. So since I listen to KLCC every day, I wouldn't want to see that happen. And so I'd like to see that issue resolved in an amicable manner. I'm not sure how that occurs, but and so there's several things here that give me pause about moving in a very quick fashion to sell off this property.
Mayor, I'd just like to say, from our perspective, we actually did talk to all the neighbors and the adjoining property owners, and so I guess I don't know if it's an issue of notice or there's just disagreement on how the property should be used into the future. So I would say that from our perspective, we have talked to property owners, we have talked to adjacent folks. With respect to the push, this is the first time the council has had a meeting since we've come back from break, and so what the prospective buyers have asked us to bring that forward to the council. We have not been involved in their negotiations for their timing, so they've asked us to bring that forward, and of course the council can choose to make a decision at whatever time you choose to make that decision.
Councilor Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I really don't like, I mean, it's like, oh, there's a deadline Friday. Come on, make up your mind. It's 9:30 at night on Monday night, and we just heard about it 3 days ago. And, that deadline, I don't understand why, I don't like to make decisions under the gun either. I go Councilor Clark that way. Supposedly they've already had 2 extensions of the contract negotiations. We could have heard about this a long time ago. I mean, before we went on break. So it's really kind of, I think it's improper to bring this to us and just a few days before their deadline, and then it's without exploring the KLCC issue or the issue with the Starlight Lounge. And the only reason I voted against tabling it, we should talk about it on Wednesday. We need to talk about this some more. I agree. The only reason is because I wanted people to make comments tonight, and maybe things would come out of more questions to ask. I fully support another session. That wasn't the issue. As far as KLCC, if they're going to get their tower blocked off, I think the developer needs to buy them a new tower so they can cover all of the town. They shouldn't be prejudiced in this in any form, I don't believe. And I'd like to hear Starlight Lounge issues. I mean, will the owner of that property be allowed to buy the parcel if it's split in half? And was that part of the deal?
I'll respond to that.
I mean, part of a suggestion.
So this was a proposal that came to us. The property wasn't for sale previously. Yeah. And because of the alignment with our policies and plans, the idea of downtown housing and a renovated storefront, we're bringing this forward. The owner, say if the Starlight building owner had an interest in buying it, that would we would bring the proposal towards you for your action.
So he's not interested in buying the half of the lot?
I think...
I see a picture. The reason I ask, I see a picture here. There's a dotted line. It's like it's split in half, running along, the perpendicular property line, which makes sense.
Right.
Yes.
The difficulty
so Road
would
could
be...
buy the southern portion, and maybe Starlight could buy or continue to lease from the Urban Renewal Agency the northern. That might be a solution here. I'm not against the project. I hope I'm not projecting that intent. But it just seems way too rushed to me with all the other things that we have to prepare for tonight's meeting, City Hall, all this stuff. It's a lot to go over the weekend, and so I think we need another meeting and try to, and hopefully all these things can be worked out in a beneficial manner.
Councilor Pryor.
Thank you. I also voted against tabling because I'm not going to be here at Wednesday's meeting. And so I wanted to ask a couple of questions to get some answers, and then I may move to table again, and we may get the vote this time. When I look at the map, I notice that just the questions are, the entire property is owned by the Urban Renewal Agency, correct?
Yes.
And so the Starlight Lounge has a deck back there.
Yes.
That deck is not on their property, it's on Urban Renewal property.
Correct.
But they have permission to do that?
They have a revocable permit.
Okay, but they do have a permit. It's a legal use.
Yeah.
The way the property line is drawn looks like it does not encroach on any of the property directly behind their building. So access for parking, the deck, and it looks like a dumpster are all unimpeded.
That was intentional.
That was intentional. So from what I'm looking at here, they're not going to have to dismantle anything, take anything down, or change their parking method if this sale goes through.
Correct.
So it sounds like, to me, the big issue here is not what we're proposing to do, it's how we did it. And the concern is, well, you didn't talk to me. And what I'm hearing you say is, well, we talked to the owners of the building, and I'm under the assumption the owners of the building were okay with the intended use?
We had a number of emails going back and forth, and the owner of the business was also copied on those emails. And the issues that were raised were specifically about maintaining access to that back patio area, trash, emergency egress, things like that, which we were hoping would be addressed by only selling the half of the parcel to the south.
Okay, so trash, egress, and the deck look like they're all still in place. So what I would do is I'll move to table again, and hopefully we'll have enough votes to do it, because if there is a deadline, we should at least talk about it on Wednesday. So if there's a hope of trying to meet the deadline, that can still take place. But I wanted to get some answers to my satisfaction. So between now and Wednesday, it would be good if, in addition to the owner of the building and the property, you also talk to the managers so that they're aware of exactly what you're proposing to do and have any questions that they might have answered. And hopefully you can do that in the next couple of days. So that on Wednesday, when we come back, we can come back and say, everybody's been talked to, everybody is in full understanding of what's going on, and then you can have a conversation on Wednesday without those process impediments, which is what's stumbling us right now, is the process. So between now and Wednesday, hopefully we can get those final process elements worked out. So, Madam Mayor, I would move that we table this issue until Wednesday.
I second that.
Moved and seconded.
Clarification?
Yes.
When you said owners, did you also include KLCC and SCS as people that they need to talk to, or is it just the Starlight you're talking about?
Primarily the Starlight, but I would also, I think that would be perfectly good. Is you talk to everybody you need to talk to, so you can come unencumbered on Wednesday. That's good.
Okay, so we have a moved and seconded, and you, yes, Mr. Clark?
Move the table is not
Debatable.
debatable, but I did want to make one further comment.
You can. Yeah. You cannot.
After we're done.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Yep. All right. Not debatable. We're going to vote. All those in favor of tabling, please indicate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Councilor Surratt.
I vote yes.
7 in favor, and in opposition, 1. It passes. So that's done. All right, Councilor Clark.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say thank you to Jan, who did call me a couple of days ago here to talk about this. And I think we had a fire alarm in the building or something while we were on the phone, and we never got to finish our conversation. I might have been better informed because you did make the effort to make sure that I had all the best information, and I appreciate that. I'm sorry we never got reconnected to talk further, but thank you.
Councilor Evans.
One last thing. I won't be here Wednesday either. I have to attend a conference, but I would, if I were here, I would recuse myself from this particular vote. So.
All right then. So I guess we reconvene this discussion on Wednesday. Thank you all for this evening's work.